Hey there. Welcome, Richard.
Thanks, Emily. Nice to see you.
You are our most repeated customer, I think, on the Soulcast.
Well, I've always got something to say, right? Something to ask. Like, oh, please, let's talk to people.
Yeah. Well, today is a special day because you've got some really interesting stuff lined up.
Yeah, you know, Living Waters did not stop in June when we sort of finished the campaign. That work has transitioned and there's a lot going on. And we wanted to come back and let people know what's happening because they haven't seen anything in a while and the holidays got busy first. But stuff's about to burst and we wanted people to know what's going on.
One of the things that we did last with Living Waters was we voted via bean count in big mason jars. And I think it's been sort of crickets since then. Do you have stuff for us?
Well, I do. And, you know, that was part of a broad-based program that the vestry wanted to do to make sure they were getting input from everybody. And it wasn't just, you know, them figuring it out. 80 people participated, and it was really interesting. They had a range of projects that they were particularly interested in. And it ranged the gamut, right? The most popular project was the kitchen update, and the least popular project was the crow's nest renovation. And so as we were trying to understand what this said, it came, what we ended up thinking was that people want the building to work. And so, for instance, mechanicals, which was listed in that booklet as redoing the boiler and the electrical system, ended up being the second most popular project. But we didn't assume that people were like, boiler, yeah, let's do it. That they were more interested in making the building work and meeting the needs of it as a long-term home for us. There's certainly a lot of deferred maintenance. And so in writing a report about it, that's how I took the fact that the mechanicals were the second most popular, was that they wanted the building to work. A lot of interesting things there. As I said, the kitchen update was the most popular project, and the kitchen expansion was lower down the list. So again, there we were like, well, people want the kitchen to work, not specifically be expanded, but they want the kitchen to work.
Yeah.
So, you know, a lot of interesting stuff. As you might expect, things that involve storage were not heavy vote getters. But it was a way for the conversation to start. And one of the things we got out of it was that there are some projects that had opposition. People didn't want to change the skylight. Other people did want to change the skylight in the nave. Some people really wanted chairs in the nave, and other people really wanted to not change the chairs. And that led to the vestry saying, well, we need to study this more. And Melissa Devereaux will eventually talk about some of the work that's being done to resolve that and find a path forward on the projects that required a little bit more definition.
Got it.
Yeah, it was a good project, and it still gets referred to as the beams. So
sweet.
Yeah.
All right. So then, following the Bean project, you have done a lot of you've done some interviews on this for this Soulcast to talk about some of these specific things. Can you tell me who you interviewed and why?
Well, just to clarify, I have not done a lot of work. The people I've talked to have done a ton of work.
Got it.
And so, you know, obviously this is all the vestry's ultimate responsibility, and they've created a number of working groups or committees. And the first one was the property committee, and that's Patrick Tahara and I think 7 other people who are going through the guts of how we interact with contractors and architects. They've selected an architect, they've selected a contractor, and they're now working to get a budget together. And so I sat down and talked to Patrick and asked him to explain a lot of that work. And it was an interesting conversation. He says that, you know, hopefully by the end of February, we'll begin to have a budget with actual projects and actual costs in them, so we can begin to see where things are going.
Wow. So who'd you interview second then?
Then I talked to Louis Maldonado, who's leading the Isaiah project.
Okay.
And just as a reminder, this is the project that will figure out how for us to share the tithe that we're going to give from this project, probably right at $400,000 with the community beyond our walls. As a lot of people talk about it, it's trying to repair the breach.
Sweet. And then who's your third interview?
Melissa Devereaux, who is our outgoing, soon to be outgoing senior warden, and she's talking about a lot of the working groups that the vestry created to get more parishioner/user feedback about specific areas, for instance, the kitchen or the undercroft, and about what she sees happening there. And the theme in all of this is that the work is continuing, and there are a lot of parishioners who are active.
Yeah.
Maybe not with as much, like wow as before, but the work is continuing, and it's about to break out into the open, and Living Waters continues. Patrick Tahara, thanks for coming in today. You've been chairing the property committee working on the Living Waters campaign. The people might have not been paying much attention to Living Waters since late summer. You all have been busy, and you've been having meetings, and you've selected an architect. How did that process go?
We have recommended HY Architects out of Oakland, California. They are an exceptional architect that has worked on groups as ourselves, designs that are relevant to the projects that we're looking at, and have worked in the city of Berkeley as well. They also have a very strong team of consultants that consists of local minority and women-owned businesses that will help with the process of what we're moving on to.
What kind of work are they doing right now?
Right now, they're in the start of the conceptual design. So they've issued a couple of floor plan. They're working on a couple of floor plans that will be presented to us this month, which we will hopefully provide that information and options to the user groups that we will be working with in terms of getting their feedback on that information of the floor plans.
Excellent. And you've also chosen a contractor to actually do the work.
Yes, and we've chosen a contractor. It's WCI Contractors. They're out of Walnut Creek, California. They also have a local presence in terms of working in the East Bay, Berkeley, Oakland area. They bring to us a multitude of different types of project types, but they are relevant experience in terms of working on elevators, working on installing elevators, working on office and tenant improvements, as well as they have experience in working with the city of Berkeley.
Excellent. And so we're recording this early in January. What's the status of your work, and what comes next?
So as I mentioned, we're at the midpoint or the starting point of our conceptual design. Our conceptual design process will last probably until February of this year, or until next month, at which time that we will have the contractor that we have selected to provide a budget, overall budget of what they think that the construction costs will be at that point in time. We hope that in February, we will then present that to the vestry in order to understand what the scope of work will be eventually be. We are just trying to figure out what that might be.
Could you explain a little bit about the conceptual design? Is that imagining how big the kitchen might be, or where the stove might go, or is that kind of work?
It is essentially, it's more of an overall kind of understanding of what the scope would be. So yes, it'll be looking at the kitchen area, looking at the storage in the parish hall. We'll be looking where the elevator will be placed in terms of the work. We will be looking at the systems of mechanical and electrical systems that are going to play a big part of this project. And we will also look at the undercroft and how that will work as we move into the next phase of our construction work.
What kind of timing do you see for the work? You'll get the conceptual drawings in February, and then what happens?
Well, at that point in time, once we get once we have our recommendations that we're providing to the vestry, hopefully it will be in February end of February of this year. We hope to then move forward in terms of going through design development, which will refine the documentation, and then construction documents, which will then be used to submit for permit to the city of Berkeley for construction. Hopefully by mid to late summer of this year, we may be in that place of starting construction. So I would say August, September of this year, we hope to start.
And so once construction starts, do you have a guess about how long it would take at this point?
We're estimating it'll probably take, if it's one phase, it'll probably take 6 to 8 months in terms of once we start construction. But we want to make sure that once we start construction, that everything is set and ready to go. And that means not just being able to obtain all the labor and all the materials and equipment in a timely manner, but also prepare All Souls in terms of getting and the parishioners to understand that we will be in construction for a period of time, and we will have to go through that process, which can be a challenging time. However, in the end, we hope that it will be something very rewarding and something that we all been looking for.
That'll be the time when the "Pardon Our Dust" signs go up.
Yeah. Yes, exactly.
All right. Thank you for all your hard work.
Thank you.
Thanks. Hello, Louis. Thanks for joining us today. You've been busy with Living Waters. Could you give us an update on what you've been doing since the fall?
Sure. Yeah, I'd be happy to, Richard. You know, as we know, the Living Waters capital campaign was very successful, and the vestry, in connection with the campaign, last April voted unanimously that 10% or a tithe of our capital campaign would be dedicated to community projects, things that primarily in the East Bay that we believe would be important in helping people. And as part of that, a team or work group formed, and we're calling it it's called the Isaiah Project Work Group, because the vestry also, as part of that, over the summer, issued a short sort of written guidance to the work group to kind of with their thoughts on how we might approach the work. The vestry also asked our rector, Phil, to form a team that could dig deeper into these issues and make recommendations to the vestry on projects that we could fund through the tithe. So it's been a very interesting process so far. We have a lot of work still ahead of us this coming year, and we will be coming back to the congregation again when we get a little bit further into looking at possibilities.
Okay. When do you think you might be able to start funding donations, gifts to organizations?
Right. Yeah, that's a very good question. You know, obviously, you know, part of it is we want to make sure this is consistent with the capital campaign funding and how funds are going to be coming in. And so I think the earliest we would begin funding would be probably the second half of 2024. Okay. And that's partly to make sure the funds that we do have sufficient funds that have come in. And also, I think just our process is going to take most of this year, I think, to get to the point of the final recommendations to the vestry. So I think that's the way it would work. The other point there is that we are leaning towards multi-year grants, like grants of probably 2 or 3 years rather than one lump sum grant. Mm-hmm. Many of the people we've spoken with and members of our own work group who work in this area for nonprofits say that getting a multi-year grant is incredibly valuable to the organization, because then they know they have some stability for 2 or 3 years, and mm-hmm. it enables them to plan better and maybe even to go out and get matching grants and so forth.
Oh, gotcha. So Louis, what areas has the committee identified that are interesting to make further study about?
Well, we in December, we did recommend 4 focus areas to the vestry. And those are children and youth empowerment, with a particular emphasis on education, culturally relevant mental health services, and what we're calling fostering community among children and youth. Secondly, housing, with a particular emphasis on the unhoused and those who are in transition to permanent housing. Thirdly, Native American land and sovereignty, an area that we haven't done a lot of work in before as a congregation, but that was important to many people, both in the listening sessions and in the work group. And fourth, environmental justice, particularly looking at community disparities within the East Bay, how people are being impacted by environmental pollutants or by climate change, all of those kinds of things.
Louis, it sounds like you and the committee are doing amazing work, and I'm so grateful. I think this is a pretty amazing project, and I'm really grateful and thankful for your time and effort on it.
Great. Well, thanks, Richard. We'll look forward to reporting back later.
Sounds great. Hello, Melissa. Welcome to the Soulcast about living waters.
Thank you.
So we've been talking to other people involved in living waters, and frequently they're saying the vestry asked us to do this. And so as the senior warden, I was wondering if you could tell us what the vestry's been thinking about living waters lately, and what else is going on.
We knew that there were expert groups within our congregation that could support the architect that we hired and the property committee and the contractor to go deeper, to really understand how those spaces get used and what the particular issues are that gave rise to the need to renovate the space or the opportunity to use the space differently. So we charged a group of what we call user groups. There are 5 user groups. And those are sort of small groups of parishioners who frequently use a particular space or have a particular area of expertise in the use of that space.
So for instance, like the kitchen, is that?
That's right. There's a kitchen user group, an undercroft user group, landscaping user group, a nave user group, and finally an AV sort of IT user group.
Gotcha. Well, certainly during the capital campaign, people would frequently come to me and say, well, what are we going to do about the undercroft? And it's such a big canvas. I guess you could do virtually anything with the undercroft.
Right.
And this is the group that's going to figure out like what space gets treated in what way. Is that the mission?
That's right. I think maybe another way to think about it is they're really a resource for the property committee and the architect and contractor to help them understand how the space has been used historically and what some of the problems are with that space, and then also what could be possible. Right. So they're really a group that Patrick and the property committee can come to with questions. What if we tried it this way? Do you think that would cause problems? Those kinds of things. They can really support that sort of iterative design process. And they started, actually, though, it's important to know, with no design information, and actually we're not even there yet, but just by answering a set of questions about this use of this space from the property committee. I think it's also important to know that they're not designing the space. They're really a resource. Right. So just I want to be clear, we have not outsourced the design of the space to small groups of parishioners, but they're giving some extra support. We're working really hard now to do some pretty intentional transition. Of course, we don't know who the new vestry members will be. We'll have a slate that we'll elect at our annual meeting, but we're doing a lot of planning now to make sure that that handoff is as seamless as possible. I am confident that All Souls has all that we need to do some great work and continue to be a really shining example and of sort of stewardship, and also a kind of a beacon for the community around us in Berkeley.
So much thanks to you, Melissa.
Well,
We're grateful for your
thank
leadership.
you.
and,
Lots of hands make light work.
Indeed.
Wow, that is a lot of stuff, a lot of details. You were right. That is a lot of people doing some really intense and good work behind the scenes right now.
Yeah, it is. It is. You know, this whole project has been just amazing. We raised $3.9 million in commitments to do this. We had a commitment as late as December. So that activity is still happening. People are beginning to fulfill their commitments. And we think there's a great possibility that we won't have to take out a loan to do this work, which is really exciting. You know, I continue to just be astonished by the generosity and the spirit of this congregation, meeting this challenge and getting ready for the next decades. And you heard today, it's a lot of people doing a lot of work to continue moving that ball. And I commend them, and I am grateful.
All right, well, All Soulsians, keep an eye out for what's ahead. Maybe you'll see a wall get bashed in pretty soon, or maybe just a budget come out.
Exactly.
So we'll look to you, Richard, for some updates in the months to come.
Everybody,